The Texas rig Senko catches fish anywhere in the country, but what if I told you there is not one, but 3 better ways to rig it than this? Today we're gonna go through 3 of my favorite ways to rig a Senko by showing you the gear you need for each rig, how to rig it, and when to use each one to ensure you can catch the most amount of fish possible on a Senko. Before we continue today's video, do you want to catch more fish but only have limited time on the water? Well, I have just launched the Real Insight Fishing Program that is designed to maximize your time on the water and help you catch the most amount of fish as a weekend angler. Through this program, I will be hosting monthly seminars on topics voted on by the members of the community to make sure I'm creating the most helpful information, as well as member exclusive fishing tips and even a community feature where you can ask your specific questions and get them answered by me. If you are interested in signing up, you can check out the link in the description below and start catching more fish today. It would be greatly appreciated, and it is probably the best way that you can help support the channel. Also, if we get enough members to sign up on that program, that's going to allow me to go full-time for making YouTube content. So the content on this channel and the Real Insight Fishing Program will get even better. There will be a lot more content coming down the line. If you can help me reach that goal, we would greatly appreciate it. Now, there's no denying that a weightless Texas rig Senko will always catch fish and is not inherently a bad way to rig a Senko, but I think there's a couple more things we can do with our Senko to give us more options. Ultimately, this bait, while it seems like it's just a weightless finesse bait that you should use, it is incredibly versatile and there's a million different ways you can rig it. But today we're gonna talk about my 3 favorites. But before we do that, we must first talk about the weightless Texas rig, how to rig it up and what makes it special, and then what we can improve on a little bit with our other rigs here. So obviously for the weightless Texas rig Senko, it's super simple. I take an extra wide gap hook right here. This is a 5/0 is usually what I like to use. And we have our weightless Senko. You go ahead and punch it down through the nose of the bait right here down in the center, get to the bend of the hook, you pop it out, you bring it all the way around, you push it up onto the eye of the hook, and then you go ahead and Texas rig your bait as you would any other soft plastic. And now you're ready to go fishing. That's it. You got a Texas rig Senko, good to go. Now, this bait is fantastic around the spring and anytime those fish are just really tough to get to bite. If they're in cover, but they don't really want to chase down baits or anything like that, and they're shallow, you can catch them on this no problem. You cast it next to the cover, it won't get hung up very easily because it's Texas rigged, and it slowly shimmies its way down to the fish, and they will come out and grab that thing. It works amazing around all types of grass cover and other places as well, but there's a couple things that you can't do with this rig. The first one obviously is fish in deep water. You can't get this bait any deeper than like 3, 4, 5 feet. Other than that, you gotta sit there and let this thing sink for a long time to get down there. And it really limits how fast you can fish. And that's most people's biggest complaint about fishing a Senko, is it's super slow and boring to fish. Now, some of these rigs aren't going to be much more exciting, but it might allow you to fish a little bit more faster with a Senko. The other thing with this is one of the main culprits that you only get one fish on these Senkos. If you rig it on a Texas rig like this and a fish bites it, you're gonna rip the bait in the front and in the back here where the hook is placed, and you're losing that bait every single time. You're never gonna get more than one fish off of a true Gary Yamamoto Senko rigging it up like this. A couple of these other baits right here, we're gonna be able to get maybe a couple extra fish out of a bait, saving you more money in the long run. So let's jump into rig number 1 here and show you how we can improve. So up first with our rig here, you're probably gonna notice these hooks. I've talked about them many times on the channel, and this is the owner twist lock hook. She's back again. It's an excellent hook for any of these soft plastic baits, especially Senkos, and there's 2 ways you can do it. Again, if you just want to get some longevity out of your bait, just use the unweighted ones of these and you will have a lot more success because of the screw lock that is on the front of this pin. So it will hold your bait in place a little bit better up at the front, and you'll only rip in the back a little bit here, and sometimes you can work your hook back into the bait a time or 2 to fish 1 or 2 more fish out of that bait. But we're gonna go a little bit further here, and we're actually going to use the weighted version. There's a couple sizes that they come in, but they come in a 5/0 hook size, and we have the 1/8 here today, but there's a couple other sizes you can use. The one disclaimer I'm gonna give you is the heavier you go with this, the less action you're gonna get out of your bait. So it's not gonna have that shimmy that you're gonna get with an unweighted Senko, but if you use this properly, you can still get some shimmy and fish it in a little bit deeper water. Now with these hooks, we've done it before. You take the centering pin and you put it right in the nose of the bait and you go ahead and twist this thing right on there up to the eye of the hook. And then once you have it up on there, you just find where that's gonna lay flat on the bait. You go ahead and punch your hook right through the back, and then you'll go ahead and Texas rig it just like you would anything else. Now this weight is so light and it's in the belly of the hook, or if you wanted to add lead wire like we've talked about before, you could shift the lead wire back even further in the bait to add it in a different spot. This is going to still have that shimmy on the fall because of the placement of the lead. Instead of it being on the nose of the bait, pulling it nose down, it being centered back a little bit more will cause it to still shimmy. And that's why I mean use the lightweight, 1/16, 1/8, at most maybe a 3/16. That's probably pushing it. If you're getting up in the quarter or more range, it's just gonna start falling nose first because it's still too much weight compared to the rest of the bait. But this will allow you to get this down there a little bit deeper and a little bit faster and fall into places that those fish have never seen a Texas rig Senko before, because it will have a weight that just kind of shimmies it down there. This will also still cause it to come through grass incredible because you don't have the bullet weight on the front. It just has the nose of the bait and it works through the grass like a normal weightless Senko would, but it can get down in the grass a little bit more instead of lay on top of it if you have it weightless. So that's a couple things you can do with that. And again, that centering pin is going to keep that bait on the hook a lot longer than just your regular extra wide gap hook. So you're gonna get a little bit more success with that right there and save more money. Now let's move into technique number 2 and get a whole different action out of a Senko. So for technique number 2 here with a Senko, we are gonna get these Zappu Wacky Rig jig heads. They're gonna have a little weight on the head of the jig head. I love fishing a Wacky Rig too, but again, you're gonna limit yourself in the depth of water that you can fish and limit the baits you can fish. We're gonna talk about that in just a second, but first let's show you how to rig this up. This thing is your standard Wacky Rig. You're gonna go ahead and take your ring. I like these VMC crossover rings. I'm gonna go ahead and put this on the bait. I'm gonna go ahead and get it right in the center of the bait like I would any other Wacky Rig, and then drop that off onto the bait. I'm gonna take my pliers out, and now we have our ring on the middle of the bait. So from here, the next thing that I have to do is go ahead and take my Weedless Wacky jig head that I have on here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and hook it perpendicular to the bait through that centering channel that comes on these O-rings. So now I have a Wacky jig head bait. It's still weedless because it has a weed guard on here. It's not gonna be perfectly weedless, it's just a little wire weed guard, but it will deflect some of the weeds and some of the wood that you might pull it up against. And I have a Wacky bait presentation. Now the Wacky rig falls even slower than the Texas rig because it's falling horizontally, so it has a much slower fall rate. But now if you add this jig head on there, it's going to still have the shimmy because the weight is pulling from the center, but it's gonna fall a little bit quicker. So you can fish this bait faster, you can throw it, let it shimmy to the bottom, hop it up off the bottom, let it fall back down, reel it back in, make another cast, as opposed to throwing it out there, letting it sink, letting it sink, letting it sink before it ever even hits the bottom. So not only can you fish it faster, but like I said, you can fish different baits. So I love the Gary Yamamoto Senkos, the 6 Sense Clouts, even the Bass Pro Stickos. They have a ton of salt content and have that shimmy. I've talked about it before. Sometimes I've said that I really don't like the Yum Dingers on a Wacky rig because they just don't have the right action. Well, now you're adding a weight into your bait with this jig head. You can throw a Yum Dinger on here and get the same action as a Gary Yamamoto Senko because it's gonna pull with more force to get you more shimmy. That salt pulling to the bottom, that's what causes the shimmy. So if you have the weight on the front, you can get the shimmy with the Weedless Wacky jig head here. And again, these come in a variety of sizes, anything from a 1/16 up to a 3/16. Just be careful on your weight selection there. Again, the heavier you go, the less action you're going to get eventually because it's gonna pull it and the bait will not be shimmying, it will just be folding as it falls to the bottom. So I like the 1/16, 1/8 ounce, somewhere in that range. but if you really need the 3/16, you could go with that one as well. All the products we use in today's video will be linked in the description below. If you'd like to check any of those out and help support the channel, it will be greatly appreciated. And then you'll be able to try some of these rigs out for yourself. But for now, let's get into number 3, which is probably one of my favorites and a little sneaky trick I've done for years that not many people know about. Now for rig number 3, this one is going to be super simple and it's going to do some sneaky stuff with your Senko here. Now you can go back to using an extra wide gap hook if you don't care about bait longevity. I've used the 5/0 extra wide gap for this technique for years, or you could use the unweighted twist lock that we talked about earlier. And all you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and Texas rig your Senko weightless, just like we've done for the very beginning one. And you're probably thinking, you just said that there's better ways to rig it. Why are you doing it the exact same way? That's where this little guy will come in right here. And this is a Nico rig nail weight, but we're Texas rigging it up. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm gonna bite a little section of the tail off here. I go ahead and just take a tiny bit off just so it's flat enough so I can get my Nico weight in here. I have a 1/8 ounce because I buy the biggest one and then just pinch it off where I need it, but you could use whatever size you want, and you're actually going to put this in the tail of your bait. So I would probably use something like a 1/16. I'd usually cut this in half, but I'll go ahead and just push this whole nail weight into the tail here. All you're going to do is feed this thing down in there as far as it'll go and pull the tail back over it. And it is going to look exactly like a Texas rig Senko that's weightless, but it will have a little weight in the tail here. And what this is going to do is when you're fishing around different types of cover, rocks, docks, wood, docks and wood especially are my favorite. You can cast this right to the edge or near the dock and it will back its way into the dock as it sinks. Instead of it falling horizontally right outside the dock where the fish live underneath of it, you can throw it to a place that you might not be able to cast all the way under, and then the tail will glide it back underneath the dock. And then that will land in where the fish are and they'll be able to come out and grab that thing. And again, like I said, be careful with your weight selection. The heavier you go, this will start to fall vertical as opposed to back in. You need a light weight to be able to get it to do that. It'll back just a little bit up. But if you put like the full 1/8 in here, you'll start to get it to fall at like a 45-degree angle instead of like a 60-degree angle or something like that. You're gonna want to use the lightest weight you can get away with. If you can throw a 1/16 or a 3/32, it will back up underneath that dock, still have a little bit of a shimmy, and fall nice and subtle right under where the fish live, and you'll be able to catch a ton of fish. And while these rigs will have you catching more fish on a Senko in no time, if you want to improve your fluke fishing rigs, check out this video right here where I go through 3 of my favorite fluke rigs to help you catch even more fish as well. Make sure you check out the Real Insight Fishing program down below and help support that if you're interested, and hit the subscribe button. We'll see you on the next one.